The dew hasn't dried on the grass, but already your palms are slick, not with morning mist, with fear. Your shield is heavy, your breath louder than it should be. You feel the man beside you shift, just barely. He's nervous too. You lock shields, wood to wood, arm to arm. You are no longer yourself. You are the wall. Behind you, a push, tightening the line. In front, nothing but stillness, for now. But you know it's coming. The roar, the charge, the crash. And when it comes, when the enemy smashes into you like a wave against stone, you don't fall, you hold. And together, you push back. This wasn't chaos, it was strategy. It was unity. It was Viking war at its finest. This isn't brute strength. It was a masterpiece of discipline and design. You breathe through your teeth, slow, shallow, tasting and smelling the smoldering fires drifting from the camps beyond the ridge. The smoke clings to the morning air like a warning. Your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth. All moisture has fled, pooling instead in the sweat of your palms, and yet you do not run. You are resolved. You are a Viking. The line is tight, shields press in, left, right, behind. 100 men, maybe more. It doesn't matter. You could be 500, you could be 50, but your part is one step wide, one shield tall, and that is your world. Across the field, they are more than you, louder, sharper, hungry for glory. Helmets catch the morning sun like scattered silver coins. Banners snap above them, bright, defiant, clean. Their spears raise uneven, a crooked forest of wood and iron swaying with hunger. They are fresh, well-fed, well-armed. You don't need to count. You feel it. Their numbers stretch wide enough to bend the horizon itself. And your line? Smaller, quicker, coiled like a serpent waiting to strike. Your band knows their strength, their resolve, and they know that discipline wins. Your line, your brothers in arm, they're quiet. Not from fear, from focus. Eyes narrow, shields tighten. The older man to your right musters a prayer to Thor, or maybe his wife. You don't know. You'll never ask. The younger one on your left spits and grins. Valhalla or victory. Either way, we're drinking mead tonight, he says. You nod, knowing that death and life only matter if your feats are worthy of honor. From the rear ranks, orders travel, not in shouts, but in grunts, in movement, in rhythm. The wall breathes. You feel it now. The push. Not panicked, not wild, controlled, braced. Shield to shield, row to row. The second line readies their spears. You hear them slide through the gaps tip by tip. The third row, axes on shoulders, eyes peering over heads. Tighten the line, a voice growls from somewhere deep in the ranks. Hold! Another voice calls, steadier, older, like waves crashing on the cliffs. The enemy begins to move. Their steps are in rhythm, just like yours. They shout, cheer, beat weapons against shields. Some of them run too early. You see glimpses of a few slow, stumbling fools surging forward and soon to be obstacles for their comrades. A horn blasts from their side, a long, low bellow, like a dying ox being prepared for a feast. And they come, a full charge. Your heartbeat vanishes, stolen from your chest. Not fear, not yet. Something deeper, something colder, like a sea rushing out before the wave returns to swallow the shore. They come fast. A flood of men with rage in their eyes and sharp steel in their fists. You grip your shield so tight that your fingers burn. You lower your stance, you plant your heels in the dirt, you feel the shoulder of the men beside you press firm against yours, and in that breath, just before the storm hits, he leans and whispers, "We hold together and we break their will." And you believe him and you are resolute, and you have confidence in your wall and in your training. The enemy is 30 paces out. You hear it now, the rattle of their armor, the pounding of their feet, the fury. You hear the man ahead of you screaming, not words, just sounds, just rage. And in that instant, clarity. You are calm. You are carved from ash and forged from iron. You are not a man. You are a shield. You are a wall. The first sword rises, and the blur of silver light comes down like judgment, like a bolt of lightning and fury. It slams into your shield. A crack like thunder bursts in your ears. Your arm is steady. The sting surges up your arm to your shoulder, but you don't waver. You hold. And now, the real battle begins. Across your shoulder and through the gap in the shield wall comes a spear. Quick, deliberate, then a grunt, and a body at your feet, bleeding from the neck. You don't have time to examine the corpse. Friend or foe, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters but the integrity of the wall. The blood pools fast and makes the ground slick. Another body slams into your shield. You feel the shock in your teeth. You shove back hard. Your shoulder screams, but the line holds. More shapes press in. You sense the ripple through the hole of the wall, each section being tested and proved for weakness. Iron pounds relentlessly. The shield to your left splinters with a crack like thunder, and for half a breath, you're exposed. But then the gap is filled and the wall remains. This isn't combat, it's survival. Second by second, blow by blow. You are no longer fighting to win. You are fighting not to fall. Spears from the back poke through, searching for victims. The only question is, will it hold long enough? Before the battles and before the longships etched with dragon heads landed on foreign shores, before the name Viking stirred fear across Europe, there was the shield wall. This effective battle formation was not Viking in origin, not even northern. The idea is old, ancient as war itself. From the dusty fields of Mesopotamia to the formations of Greece, warriors have long known the strength multiplied by unity. The Greeks locked bronze shields side by side, creating a wall not unlike the Vikings, only more precise, more drilled. The Romans, they turned it into an art form. The tortoise, shields on all sides, even overhead, a fortress of protection. But the Norse were different. They did not have Roman legions or Greek culture. Their land was harder, their wars smaller, their needs different. Still, when steel meets flesh and bone, tactics transcend culture, and even your ancient rivals can teach you a thing or two about how to survive. So when the Viking Age dawned around 793, it wasn't the first time shields were used in Europe, but it might have been the first time they were used like this. A land of warriors without empires. Unlike their Roman or Frankish enemies, Vikings fought not as empires, but as bands, farmers turned fighters, brothers and cousins tied together by blood, oath, hunger, and silver. A Norse warband was often outnumbered. They had to be smarter, tighter, more vicious. They didn't have the numbers to overwhelm with waves, but they had discipline, not drilled in barracks, but forged in necessity. It demanded trust, it punished hesitation, and the Vikings embraced it. Picture a small raiding party landing on foreign soil, 30 to 60 men at most. They're met by a local militia of 70, maybe 100. The advantage is clear, but the Vikings don't scatter. They lock in. They become one thing. Their shields link. Spears rise behind, swords and axes lie in wait like wolves in tall grass, and then they wait for the chance, and when it comes, it crashes and breaks, because the Viking shield wall wasn't meant to endure forever. It was meant to bait, block, and explode. The design was deceptively simple. A row of warriors, shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping. Behind them, more rows, 2, 3, sometimes 4 deep. The front row bore the brunt. The rear rows braced, stabbed, shouted. The formation could hold its ground, it could grind forward, or it could break open like a trap. Most Viking shields were round, made of linden or fir wood, rimmed with iron, light enough to maneuver, large enough to cover a man's torso. At the center was a boss or a metal dome to deflect blows and punch forward. But the real weapon wasn't the shield, it was the formation itself. The men weren't chosen by size. They were chosen by will, by their ability to trust the man beside them. The strength of the shield wall lay not in its wood or iron, nor in the weapons behind it. It worked because of something older, deeper, a bond between men, and the quiet terror it inspired when it withstood even the fiercest charge. In the shield wall, no man stood alone. His shield wasn't just for himself. It was a gift to the man beside him and an offering of protection and trust. He guarded his neighbor's right side with the left edge of his shield, and in turn, his own right was guarded by the man next to him. They locked together like stones in an arch. Remove one, and the whole collapses. This interdependence made the wall incredibly strong, but also unforgiving. If even one man faltered, if he slipped, panicked, or fell, the whole wall began to crack. The enemy would break through by brute force. They would find the weak spot, the missing piece in the chain, and pour in like flood water. So they held, not for themselves, not for glory, but for each other. To run was to abandon, not just the fight, but a brother. And in the cold eyes of the Norse gods, there was no greater shame. To stand silent on a battlefield while your enemies scream towards you is no small thing. It takes more courage to wait than to charge. The Viking shield wall didn't just resist physicality, it protected fear. Enemies expected war to begin with chaos, with drums, wildness, but the Vikings gave them stillness. A row of men, tight-lipped, motionless, their shields linked like the teeth of some vast, waking beast. No boast, no bluster, just quiet, control, precision, and discipline. That silence was a message. We're not afraid of you. We don't need to shout. We only need to step forward. And when they did advance, they did so not in waves or surges, but in unity, a single entity. Their shields thudded forward like the steps of a walking fortress, grinding their foes backwards through fear alone. For many enemies, the battle was half lost before the first sword was even drawn, because the Vikings had already won the war inside their minds. Most medieval battles were brutal, shapeless storms, men screaming, swinging wildly, slipping in the mud and blood. A true melee was impossible to control. Comrades shouted orders that no one heard, formations dissolved in moments, but the shield wall brought order to the madness. It took the unpredictability of open battle and channeled it into something powerful and potent, and when done right, unstoppable. Enemies could not flank easily. They could not separate men from their units. The shield wall created a narrow front, a killing zone, where movement was limited and every action was focused. Blows came from set angles. The chaos was funneled into something surgical. This gave the Vikings two advantages: predictability, which they could use to anticipate and counter enemy strikes, and focus, allowing them to conserve energy and unleash power at key moments. And within the narrow corridor of violence, a kind of logic emerged, a dance of discipline, a rhythm of blood. Even the most frenzied berserker had to yield to the shield wall's discipline, or be cast out of it. For the shield wall was not a place for lone glory. It was a place for warriors who knew how to act as one body with many hands. Earlier Germanic tribes had used it, so had Saxons, Celts, and Anglo-Saxons. But the Vikings used it with surgical precision, not just to hold ground, but to conquer, raid, and intimidate. In fact, the Anglo-Saxon chronicles record battle after battle where shield walls met, clashed, and broke. It was the dominant tactic in early medieval warfare until cavalry, archers, and flanking maneuvers became more common in the late 11th century. But for over 200 years, the shield wall was king, and for the Vikings, it was sacred. They trained for it, sang about it, died within it. Their sagas don't speak of lone heroes slaying dozens. They speak of men who stood their ground, who held the line until death. To break formation was worse than cowardice. It was betrayal. And yet, the shield wall was not invincible. It could break. A single gap would become a wound. Uneven ground could twist its strength, and even the strongest lines could crack if discipline failed. But its true test came when it faced not chaos, but another wall. When shield met shield, when nations collided like thunder, when two lines of will crushed, not as warriors, but as worldviews. That's where the earth shook. The Viking shield wall was more than a formation. It was a living, thinking entity on the battlefield. Unlike the berserker's fury or the archer's reach, the shield wall was not about flash. It was about grit and grinding forward. Every part of it had purpose. Positioning mattered. Flat, open ground was ideal, giving the wall stability. Slopes and bogs could disrupt it. The Vikings often maneuvered to set their line on firm earth, forcing their enemies to charge uphill or across uneven terrain, making their formations falter before contact was even made. The wall itself was layered. The front line bore the shields, edge to edge, forming the primary barrier. The second line wielded spear, stabbing forward through gaps over shoulders, under shields. The third and fourth lines held swords and axes ready to fill in gaps, attack over the top, or respond to breakthroughs. Vikings could advance in this formation, shuffling in unison step by step, each movement driven by the rear lines pressing forward with disciplined force. The shield wall didn't rush, it crushed. Each step closer narrowed the space, sapped the enemy's breath, and brought panic. But the shield wall was not just defense, it could be used for surgical strikes. One favored tactic was the boar's snout, a wedge formation designed to break enemy lines at a point of weakness. Another was the feigned retreat, a Viking specialty. Warriors would break formation, pretending to flee in disorder, luring the overconfident enemy into pursuit. Then, when they were strung out and disorganized, the Vikings would turn, regroup, and reform the wall behind them, trapping the enemy between the hammer and the anvil. But the wall had limits. It was strongest at the front. If flanked, it could crumble, and it was only as strong as its discipline. If men panicked or pursued recklessly, the cohesion shattered, and with it, the strength. That's why the greatest Viking commanders weren't just strong, they were masters of rhythm and timing, guiding their men like a conductor shaping a symphony of steel. Let's look at how these tactics played out in real blood and earth. The Battle of Maldon, where pride met the wall. The tide rolled in slowly across the Essex marshland, lapping at the narrow causeway between the two armies destined to bleed. On one side stood an elderman, a proud commander of the Saxon men. These men were drawn from farms and villages, wielding spears and axes, born of harvest, not battle. On the other, a band of Viking raiders, likely from Norway or Denmark. Their ships anchored nearby, sails furled like sleeping dragons. They had come for tribute, but the men of Essex refused. They held the advantage. The Saxons held the advantage because the causeway between the Saxons and the Viking forces was narrow, a natural choke point where only a few men could pass at once. They could have held them, starved them out, or bled them slowly. But the Saxon leader, the elderman, he was a man of honor, or maybe hubris. In a gesture later criticized by his own countrymen, he allowed the Vikings to cross, offering them a fair fight on even ground. It was a mistake. Once across, the Vikings formed a shield wall, tight as iron and just as cold. No noise, no fury, just a line, moving, breathing, advancing. The Saxons, relying more on raw courage and individual heroism, surged forward. They met not chaos, but discipline, and they faltered. The Saxon lines began to bend, began to fray, and the elderman, tall and fearless, he was struck down in the heart of the melee. And with his fall, the fragile cohesion of these farmers faltered. Panic spread. Some men stood, most ran. The Vikings pressed in, methodical and brutal. The wall pushed, not with speed, but with weight. It didn't matter that they were outnumbered. It didn't matter that they were foreign to the land. They held formation, and the Saxons did not. By battle's end, the field was strewn with bodies. English blood soaked into English soil. The Vikings claimed victory, not because they had more men, but because they had something more rare: unity, discipline, and the unbreakable force of a wall that refused to wield. After the Battle of Maldon, the Vikings were paid 10,000 pounds of silver in tribute, a desperate attempt by the English to buy peace, but the payment proved to be a strategic blunder. Word of the massive ransom spread quickly, and rather than deterring further violence, it emboldened other Viking raiders who now saw not just villages to plunder, but kingdoms willing to pay. The shield wall had not only won the battle, it had turned warfare into profitable intimidation, and the age of the Viking raids escalated in both frequency and ferocity, leading to Harald Hardrada, King of Norway, who stood with his men near Stamford Bridge. They were basking in the aftermath of a recent victory, armor loosened, banners flapping lazily in the breeze. They expected negotiations. They got war. From the south, like a storm over the hills, came Harold Godwinson, the English king, fresh from a forced march of over 180 miles in 4 days. His army surged into view, unexpected and unyielding. The Vikings, caught off guard, scrambled to respond. They formed a shield wall across a narrow bridge, and a desperate last-minute defense. At the bridgehead stood a lone Viking warrior, his name lost to time, but his deeds immortal. Alone, he held the narrow crossing, felling English soldiers one by one, refusing to yield even as the weight of the kingdom bore down on him. Eventually, an English soldier floated beneath the bridge and drove a spear up into the warrior's belly. He fell, but not before giving his comrades precious time. On the far bank, the Norse reformed, shields locked, axes drawn. The shield wall stood again, although it was outnumbered and half-armored. When the English struck, they met not a shattered band of invaders, but a hardened wall of veterans unwilling to surrender. The two sides clashed with fury. Blades rang out, arrows whistled, and men died in heaps. But then came the end. Harald Hardrada, massive and magnificent, took an arrow to the throat. His fall was like a stone cast into a frozen lake. It sent shockwaves through the line. The Vikings, leaderless and surrounded, could not hold forever. The shield wall finally cracked, and the Norse were cut down to the last. Few returned to their ships, fewer still saw Norway again. But what they left behind wasn't just blood and bodies, it was legend. At Stamford Bridge, the Vikings died like the warriors they had always claimed to be, not in retreat, but in formation, within the wall. And that day, the age of the Viking shield wall and the age of the Vikings came to an end. A foot slips, not yours, the man beside you. A spray of dirt, a curse spat between gritted teeth. He regains his stance. You don't flinch, you don't help, you can't. The wall doesn't pause for weakness. It absorbs it or it breaks. Another clash, another scream. A sword slashes over the top and scrapes your helmet, ringing your skull like a funeral bell. Still, you stand. You press forward. Not fast, just one step, a surge. Shields grind, mud slick. The line pushes, the enemy bends. The spear flashes past your face, the tip slicing the air between your cheek. Someone behind you shouts. A body falls forward through the enemy line, gurgling, hands still clutching at its own throat, blood spraying warm across your shield. The younger one on your left laughs. It sounds unholy, like something born in madness. Then comes the crush. They press hard, the enemy desperate to find your edge, your corner, your crack. You are not men now. You are not names. You are not sons or fathers or stories. You are weight. Pressure, mass, the very earth shifted upright and daring to stand its ground. You scream not in fear, not in rage, but in unity. A sword catches your thigh. Pain flares hot and white. You grunt, adjust, grit your teeth until you taste blood in your mouth, but your leg holds. You are still standing. You are still the wall. A horn blows again, closer now. Yours this time. A call from the rear, a voice carved into thunder. You feel it before you hear it. Advance. The wall shifts. The pressure behind becomes momentum, a tidal surge. You do not run, you move. One step, two, the line with you, the shield forward, knees bent, weight low. Every part of you aches. Your arm burns, your thighs bleed. But the pain is distant now, like wind against a stone. And then the bend, their front cracks. Not all at once, not with a scream, but like something old giving way. A brittle line of men who thought themselves strong. One falters, another slips, a third turns his eyes back, not to fight, but to flee. Then comes the shatter. It moves like a ripple through the ranks, a silent rising panic. A step backward becomes 3. The roar in their throats fades to gasps. Swords lower, eyes widen. What was once an army is now a memory, crumbling before your advance. Your brothers feel it too. Push! Everyone bellows. Break them! Cries another. The wall explodes not into chaos but into purpose. Your shield is no longer for holding, it's for striking. You slam it into a face. Bone crumples. You drive it into the chest of another. Air rushes out like a final prayer. The axe swings once, twice. You lose count. The resistance dies as quickly as it began. Some run, some crawl, some beg. The grass is red now, slick with their last defiance. You step over the fallen like stones in a riverbed, not with hate, not with glee, but with the calm of someone who did what needed to be done. Your formation is gone, but your unity remains. The wall did its duty, and now the wolves are free. You make your way to the top of the ridge, viewing what remains of the battlefield. Around you, the breathing of your brothers. Rough, ragged, real, a few weep, a few laugh, a few fall to their knees, whispering, thanking the gods. You see the young man that was on your left, blood on his face, a gash over his brow. He grins, and then he says, "You held. We all did." You nod, too tired to speak. You look at your shield, splintered now, cracked deep down the center, but still whole, just like you. And in that moment, the glory is not in the killing, not in the conquest. The glory is in standing. You held the line. You did not break, and in doing so, you gave the men behind you a chance to live, a chance to win, the chance to matter. Because this wasn't just a wall, it was a brotherhood, a promise. It was a shield not of wood, but of will. And you were part of it, and you were the wall. What does it all mean for us today? You may never swing an axe, you may never brace your shoulder in a shield wall of wood and will, while death thunders forward like a storm. But make no mistake, you will face pressure. You'll stand in boardrooms or bedrooms or backyards, feeling the chaos of life pounding down your hallway like a charging army. Deadlines, doubt, diagnosis, betrayal, bankruptcy. They'll come with noise and fury trying to make you break. And in that moment, just like those Viking warriors, you'll have a choice. Will you run or will you hold? Will you try to fight it all alone on an island of pride and exhaustion, or will you link arms with those beside you, your team, your family, your tribe? Because the truth is, the world still breaks people, but the wall still holds if we build it. The Viking shield wall wasn't just a tactic, it was a declaration. We are stronger together. It demanded unity, it demanded trust. Not ego, not rage, discipline, brotherhood, timing. Let that be your strategy in marriage, in leadership, in crisis, in calling. Strength and unity. The Vikings didn't fight as individuals, they survived as a line, a brotherhood. When the world leans in with crushing force, the strongest man is not the one who stands alone, it's the one who stands with others. Discipline over rage. The Viking wasn't just a wild beast, he was a strategist. He knew when to strike and, more importantly, when to hold. Not every moment is for charging. Some moments demand patience, focus, and control. If the shield wall cracked, the battle was lost. The same is true today. One broken promise, one faltering leader, one lapse in discipline, and everything can unravel. That's why we train, that's why we prepare, and why we lean on each other. Even now, in boardrooms, in classrooms, in churches, in foxholes, the same principle holds. Teamwork and strategy. Success doesn't come from raw talent. It comes from collaboration, from formation, from shared direction. There is strength in unity. The wall is only as strong as its weakest link. A team is only as strong as its culture, its communication, its trust. Psychologically, the shield wall had psychological power, and sometimes the greatest advantage is simply showing up and being united, creating that culture, a family, A group, a company that refuses to be divided can shake the ground without raising a fist. That's strength, that's power. So ask yourself, where is your wall? Who stands beside you? Who are you standing with? Who are you willing to hold the line for? Because in a world that glorifies independence, the Vikings remind us of a deeper truth. We were never meant to fight alone. The wall still holds, but that's only if we build it, if we trust, and if we stand together. So now we see it clearly. The shield wall wasn't just wood and iron, it was willpower made visible. It wasn't just a strategy for the battlefield, it was a strategy for life. Because in every generation, in every land, people have faced the charge. And those who stood linked, braced, unbroken, changed the course of history. The Vikings understood something we often forget in our modern age of isolation. You don't win by standing taller. You win by standing together. The shield wall wasn't just a formation, it was a philosophy. Stand strong together or fall apart alone. The Vikings knew this better than anyone, and that's why their enemies feared them. And that's why we remember them, because they didn't just fight with fury. They fought with discipline, with unity, with design. And in so doing, they built a legacy. So until next time, be bold, be strong, and awaken the Viking in you.